Hello, welcome to Philosophy Bites. Now, today we're going to look at the philosopher Aristotle, who was pictured here. Have a guess. It says to identify which philosopher is Plato and which is Aristotle. How does the stance of the philosophers reflect their individual philosophies? I'll just move this down a bit. Now, Aristotle is actually on the right. His hand is pointed outwards, looking towards the earth, whereas Plato's is pointing upwards. His book is kind of horizontal, giving us the idea that Aristotle thought that we should look around us at the world around us using our senses rather than not trusting them, because Plato didn't trust the senses. Hence his ideas of Plato's cave and things like the Matrix. The Matrix is an updated version of Plato's cave. So Plato believed that the senses couldn't be trusted. He believed things like, everything's like a dream, like how do you prove you're not dreaming? Whereas Aristotle was an early scientist, really. And he came up with he came up with philosophical theories on religion, and he came up with a lot of ethical theories. He was taught by Plato, even though he hugely respected and admired Plato, he ended up coming up with his own brand of philosophy. As I said, he was an empiricist. So empiricists use the senses. Aristotle was interested in studying what's around him. He's very famous as a biologist, one of the early biologists. He studied frogs and what made them tick. And the most famous thing about Aristotle is that he actually taught Alexander the Great and had an influence over him, because Alexander the Great, although a warrior, was also very into education and made sure that there was libraries and things like that. And that's Aristotle's influence, because Aristotle asked the question, what does it mean to be a human being? He says the way to look at this question is to work out what makes us distinctive. So he said, first of all, let's take the example of a knife. A good knife, what does it mean when we say the phrase a good knife? A good knife is sharp, doesn't rust. You can put it in the dishwasher, as I say, and it doesn't rust. It's got a nice handle that isn't slippy. So a good knife, goodness means it fulfills its function well. He then applies that to a human being. Can we talk about human beings having a function like a knife? Aristotle thinks yes. The first thing that he says about this is that why don't we look at whether human beings just living, is that the purpose of being a human being? Is it just living, just existing? He says, well, no, because plants and animals do that as well. That's not distinctive. He then says, what about just pursuing pleasure, like a pig rolling around in the mud, or a person taking ecstasy and alcohol and just trying to enjoy their life? He said, well, no, because other animals do that. Like pigs roll around in mud. Cows eat grass all day. Animals can pursue pleasure as well. So it's not distinctive. What is distinctive, however, for Aristotle, is the gift of reasoning, being able to think, being able to question things, being able to do maths, being able to do literature. So Aristotle says a good human, good doesn't necessarily mean moral in this sense. A good human fulfills its function well by reasoning well. If you use your reasoning, then you can go beyond the senses and you can actually come up with conclusions about things. That's the purpose of being a human, to reason well. He's bound to say that, of course, because he was a philosopher, and philosophers believe in reasoning. So did Plato, but for different reasons. I'll go into that on a Plato PowerPoint that I will do later. So Aristotle asked the question, what makes a good person? Now, how he answers this question is, he says again, its reasoning's got to come into it. He says there's three steps to being a good person. The first thing is you've got to know what's right. You've got to have moral knowledge. The second thing is you've got to feel the appropriate emotions. So say I give money to charity or a homeless person, I shouldn't be all resentful about it. I should, going, oh, I don't want to give them my money, but I will. It's my duty. Aristotle thought, no, that's not moral. You're only moral if you feel pleasure when you do something good. You've been trained well as a moral person if you feel pleasure when you do something good and guilt and shame when you do something bad. So that's the second step. So 1 is knowledge, 2 is feeling right, 3 is, he calls it phronesis, which means practical wisdom. It's kind of common sense. It's like some people can be really good inside, but like always are disastrous in their relationships with other people. Aristotle thought that can't be moral either. You've got to be wise and be clever the way that you deal with things. Just as an example, like there were a sad example. This bakery, its oven got broken, and it was a massive bakery, and they switched the oven off, and there was something wrong with the oven. So one of the engineers crawled inside the oven, and they hadn't let it cool down, and he was screaming on the phone like, "Help! Help! 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 Help!" But he actually died, and there was a big investigation into it for negligence. So that's not practical, is it? It's not having common sense doing something like that. They didn't mean to kill him, but they were very foolish. So that's what it means to be a moral person for Aristotle. He also has this thing called the doctrine of the mean. And the doctrine of the mean is the idea that a good action is in the middle between two bad actions. He gives the example of courage. He says, on the one hand, the opposite of courage is cowardice, which is fair enough, yeah. But on the other side, you can be almost too courageous by being foolhardy, like General Custer, like running into battle, trying to slaughter the Native Americans with a really small army. He thought, I'm going to win this, and got absolutely slaughtered. So he wasn't a good general. Watch The Last Samurai for that bit, that with Tom Cruise. So the last thing I'm going to say about Aristotle's ethical theory, I'll pick up on his philosophical theories about God elsewhere. But Aristotle comes up with the idea of happiness, or what he calls eudaimonia. It's loosely translated as happiness, but it actually means self-realization or self-fulfillment. What's going to fulfill you in your life? Now, he says that we can do things which are a means to an end. So I would ask my A-level students, why did you pick A-level philosophy? Oh, because I want to get a good grade, sir. Why do you want to get a good grade? Because I want to go to university. Why do you want to go to university? Because I want to get a job afterwards. Why do you want a good job afterwards? Because I want to get money. Why do you want money? Because I want to be happy, etc. And so Aristotle said, if you pursue things which are means to an end, which have instrumental value rather than intrinsic value, then you'll never be happy. You'll just be craving the next thing. Buddhists believe all of this as well. They believe that you should live in the moment and be mindful and concentrate on the now, not like the future all the time, thinking the future, the future, the future, the future. In Kung Fu Panda, my favorite quote is, yesterday is history, tomorrow is mystery, but today is a gift, and that's why we call it the present. So Aristotle says, in order to achieve eudaimonia, pursue goals which are ends in themselves. Like doing a piece of artwork that you might never end up showing, just for its own sake. So I remember there was an artist that was making statues on the beach right next to the sea, beautiful statues, and then the water was coming in and washing it away. And some people were like, well, why are you doing that? When it's like, and it's very Buddhist because the artist believes in everything's impermanent, nothing lasts. So he enjoyed building the statue and accepted the fact that it had come to an end when the tide came in. So for Aristotle, to flourish as human beings, pursue things which are ends in themselves. So if you like philosophy, just enjoy it. Don't worry if you don't get a fucking job. Sorry to swear. Don't worry about that if you don't get a job as a result. As a result of it, it's like it's still got value. You've done something good at university and it's still got value. Just to mention one other thing. For Aristotle uses the word telos, which means goal or purpose. Now, if you take the Catholic view on contraception, this comes from Aristotle. The Catholic teachings are influenced by Aristotle. That's where it originally comes from. Aristotle influenced the monk St. Thomas Aquinas. And basically, St. Thomas Aquinas applies Aristotle's teachings on telos to moral philosophy. So if you look at this, the telos of sex, the purpose of sex, is seen to be a biological function, procreation. Not by all, but traditionally in religious teachings, the purpose of sex is procreation. Therefore, contraception is morally wrong because it interferes with the purpose of sex, which is procreation. It stops the possibility of conceiving. There are lots of criticisms of this idea. For example, some people think, well, is the telos of sex just procreation? What if the telos of sex is love? Because in traditional Catholic teachings, like homosexuality is seen as wrong because of the fact that anal sex does not lead to procreation. That's where it comes from. It comes from Aristotle. So those are Aristotle's ethical theories. I will come on to his philosophical theories on God and transcendence at another time. Hope you've enjoyed it. Goodbye.